reached its completion in the revelation of these bowls. The one version says, in this they are exhausted. The New English Bible, consummated. The Revised Standard, it's ended. The NASB and ESV, it is finished. The King James, it's filled up. The NIV, it's completed. With the bowls, the purpose of God's revelation of wrath in this age comes to an end. It's the same vocabulary word, the same Greek verb that Jesus uses on the cross when he says, it is finished. The work of atonement by virtue of the death of the Lamb has now been accomplished. So too with the outpouring of the bowls. What God has to warn men concerning the wrath of God is finished. And if you do not hear what God says in these ways of revelation, there's no more, he's not going to say anything more. It's a very sober reality. You see, the seals point us to the wrath of God. Then the trumpets delve a bit deeper. And then the bowls give the full disclosure to the wrath of God. And it's an unfolding of the revelation of realities that concern this present age. We perceive a deepening understanding of the character of this fallen world in which we live, a world under the wrath of God. And there is also this progressive character that we're moving closer to the final judgment, to resurrection, final judgment, and the opening up of eternity. And in order to deal with these things, we need some measure of interpretive finesse. We need some measure of how to understand and balance and give weight to these things. When the bowls are finished, what happens? Judgment. The two beasts are thrown into the lake of fire. The dragon is flown into the lake of fire. Christ returns, and we enter into eternity. This is the culmination. This is in these bowls, the wrath of God. This is the last, and the wrath of God is finished. So there is parallelism. The bowls delve deeper into things that God has already been revealing to us. God's judgment upon cursed world and upon cursed men have been seen in the four horsemen, the seals, the trumpets, the bowls, but there's progress also. Movement to this culmination, to this conclusion of the revelation of God in this present age. So we've seen, by way of introduction, we're moving from the fourth cycle to the fifth, from the enmity of the two seeds to the cycle of the bowls. We're going to see the celebration of victory at the conclusion of the fourth cycle in the next verses, and we're segueing now into the fifth cycle of the bowls, which concern judgment. We've seen first now a sign from heaven. It's a significant, awesome, great, and marvelous supernatural revelation. It is the presentation of 7 angels with 7 bowls containing the 7 plagues of God's wrath. And we've been given an introductory statement to the fifth cycle of the bowls, and also a summary statement of what these bowls are. This is the last. This is the finishing revelation of God concerning his wrath to men. What can we say by way of application? But first, I want us to pause in order to gain perspective. I don't think we do this very often. I don't think we stop, think, and reflect, and try to take it in. We're so harried, we're so hurried, and we're so inundated with noise. We get frantic if our cell phone is more than 6 feet away from us. That was intended to get a nod of the head from you all. That's true. What is John asking us to do by this strange way of writing this interlocking of introducing us and then going back to the other and then looking forward again and resuming again. What is he doing by this unusual style of writing? I think what he's doing, brethren, is giving to us a literary Selah. You know what a Selah is, right? You read that when you're reading the Psalms and you see that word off to the side and you don't read it. Well, it's there for a purpose. What's it there for? Well, it's a musical term, actually. It means stop singing, listen to the instruments, and reflect and think. Think about what you've just got done singing and orient your mind to what you are now about to sing as once again the song, the hymn, the psalm resumes. So a Selah is a pause. It gives you the opportunity to look back on what has just been sung in the psalm and to orient yourself to what's coming ahead. And then you resume singing of the psalm. And that, I think, is what John is doing here in a literary, structural way. Verse 1 gets us ready for what's to come. And we're introduced and given a summary of what's ahead of us. Then verse 2 to 4 in chapter 15 tells us, look back now. And we're reoriented to where we've been in the fourth cycle. And we're reminded that that cycle ends in the final judgment of harvest. And that final judgment of harvest will be the occasion in which heaven will explode with worship and celebration. Indeed, a celebration that is at the conclusion of this age, but also commences an eternity of joy in the eternal state of glory. So we're not only looking forward in verse 1, we're looking backward in verse 2 to verse 4, as we're now ready once again to hinge forward again in verses 5 and verse 6 and following, that begins the cycle of the bowls that's now going to drive us into a deeper, more penetrating understanding of the outpouring of the wrath of God in this present age. A wrath that has always characterized God's dealings with rebellious humans, but a wrath that now intensifies in many ways because of the light that has shone upon men through the testimony of the church and through the witness of the gospel, and thereby making men all the more accountable to the judge who calls them to that final day of judgment. This is an intensification. Remember the dominant metaphor of a woman in birth pangs and the intensification of the contractions. They begin to become more extensive and more frequent and more intense, and we're seeing that as we move through the book of Revelation. So John's arrangement of these first verses in chapter 15 forces us to look ahead and then to look back and then to look ahead again, and there you have the hinging. There you have that structure that says to you, look forward. Okay, now look back. Okay, now look forward. You're not going to do that unless you stop and pause and reflect upon what you've just seen in the fourth cycle. And then understand that you're being given yet more revelation to come. It's an opportunity to reflect and to think. In chapter 13, verse 18, here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. You're not going to calculate the number. You're not going to come to understanding if you're running through your life so frantic and so busy and so harried that you don't take the time to sit in front of the Word of God, to reflect, to pray, and to ask for wisdom. I think this is a literary Selah John is telling us, reflect on these things. Secondly, by way of application, we're looking at the culmination of the curse. We've been given, on several occasions, the privilege of seeing that we participate in heavenly worship on the Lord's Day. That we are a priesthood of a new covenant temple whose activities are conducted in the presence of the King in the heavenly throne room. And we are refreshed by Sabbath blessings and nourished by the Word of God and strengthened in the means of grace and encouraged by the fellowship of the saints. But we're on a battlefield. We are still fighting, and we must yet overcome. We know that we win, but we are not finished fighting. Our overview that we've already had today, reflecting upon the significance